Good afternoon and welcome once more. Well, I know we missed the noise, but we'll just have to get on with it. Okay, so if we just go down the normal agenda, I know we just had a briefing, but we'll pick up that item in a few minutes. So welcome everybody. Thank you for turning up before time in actual fact. So do we have any apologies? Jodie, you had one, didn't you? Jonathan, rather, you had an apology from... Yes, from Jay. Sorry, I couldn't hear you earlier. Right, okay, no others? Everybody present and correct. Declaration of interest, ladies and gentlemen. You all know the drill that you can express those declarations of interest right now or any time as we proceed through the meeting, should you wish to do, or something comes up that you later consider is an interest that you need to declare. Item 3 is minutes from the last meeting.
They will come.
It does say to follow, but I've just checked behind me and they're not there. So,
it's quite a short time frame.
Yeah, it is. So are members content that those minutes follow this meeting, and then we can send in any questions that we might have on those minutes? Is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you. Do we know any idea what the timescale for that?
I sent a draft to you just now, so we can...
Oh, okay, okay,
so.
fine, yeah. Thank you. As far as I know, we have no public online, is there? No public online? No, okay, so that takes us directly back to item 5 again, and it's all yours.
Oh, I'm on. All right, excellent. Well, this is just a report, 9 months in from the adoption of the new constitution, which was the first time this has been tackled in large quantity for 25 years, so a massive undertaking. And just reflecting back, it's bedded in really well. There's lots of good stuff. Just a few almost legacy items which didn't make it into that constitutional review, which are reflected in some updated suggestions here on member officer protocol. Also, there's a suggestion of a revised terms of reference for the equalities panel, or indeed the inclusion and equality panels it may well become. And then just from a budgetary point of view, reflection on some tweaks to the supplementary estimates process, or rather the introduction of one, as we haven't had one, which is a fairly standardised piece across the local government world. I think, as I say, from my point of view, there's also some observations in there about the 2 ONS panels and how those have worked, which has largely been really constructive. I think as officers we reflect on a couple of pieces. So we've seen an alteration in the timing on those 2 panels, so that we've got them in alternate weeks, and also pitched at such a time that it can really feed into cabinet, which will hopefully be helpful going forward. But that's one where I'm sure members can just keep an eye on those things, reflect on anything they want as we move forward, but nothing is proposed in terms of changes there. But in overall terms, I think it's a reflection on lots of good stuff, a few tweaks which are going to be very much in keeping with the local government world and best practice elsewhere, including LGA guidance. And it's one where I would commend the report to the committee. I know we'll have no doubt lots of questions and feedback, which will be very helpful. And Chair, we of course do have the other officers in Sam and Jodie who've been working on equalities, and also may have something to feed in on the supplemental estimates point, and also of course Robert as well to assist with the member officer protocol and whatnot. And thank you.
Thank you for that short introduction, Tom. Much appreciated. I already have Tim on my list from the other from the other room. So Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming you're going to take comments by sections in the report. Otherwise, we're going to end up talking across each other on different aspects of it. But so I did have some comments on 3.1, where I know there's not a recommendation being made to us, but our views are being requested. And the view is whether we should consider the option of moving to a single overview and scrutiny committee in future. So I don't know the answer to that question. I do think, though, that if ever we did that, we would need to have sought the views of the chairs and the people on those committees. And I just think it's quite difficult for Civic Affairs to come along and make assumptions without hearing all angles. I was an advocate of us having two overview and scrutiny committees, and I think I'm still somewhere there, but the point that we were trying to recognise when we introduced that, I think, in the Constitution, was that we knew we were trying to bring about a culture change, and that culture change applied both to officers and to members, and I think that is exactly how it's felt to me as a sometimes attender at those meetings, and then at the cabinet meetings where their views have been reported. I just think that 9 months is far too soon to start drawing conclusions from that. And I think that the actual points that are made there in the text of the report kind of need to be a little bit challenged. It's not that I'm coming down on the other side, but I just think to put a bit of balance around it. So you found some councils that only have one overview scrutiny committee. I've found some councils that have more than one overview and scrutiny committee. So there are plenty of councils of all colours with two: Chesterfield, Exeter, Warwick, Huntingdonshire, Lincoln, West Suffolk, Mansfield, Basildon. Lincoln, which is actually a district council like us, has 4. So it's there is more than one side to this question. And I remember that when we talked about it in the working party, that one of the grounds for saying, well, actually having more than one seems like a good idea, is that Oxford City Council at the time had 4, which they've subsequently apparently changed, which I see as well. But they've also had they've moved into no overall control, and so presumably there have been some other considerations involved in them too. So I would say I don't see evidence yet, and I just think we have to be a bit careful about burnishing our constitution for the long run when actually we have 2 years left. And so I think that it's not to say there won't be reasons to change our constitution, but I just think that they need to be kind of quite operationally compelling to us to really kind of invest the kind of focus on them at the moment.
Jenny?
Okay, well, we're in the interest of going section by section. So, yeah, the first thing is also on the scrutiny committees and as vice chair. Now, I was a little bit confused about the timing, but we do know some officers have been really good about engaging and getting papers to the committees, in good time. And sometimes it's been a little bit difficult. But, and we also have an issue with just papers. So this is very operational, papers being mailed out to us, which is a whole other thing. I am, particularly as we've only been going 9 months really, and we've got a new scrutiny officer, dedicated scrutiny officer come in. I am very keen that we continue with 2 scrutiny committees, and the reasons are really that we've only been able in the last year to stick to what's on the forward plan. We haven't done any deep dives. We've done a bit that's post-decision, but not much. I mean, that's the 3CICT. We've had a couple of external people coming in, like, we've got a lot going on, the development company, Peter Freeman, and we've of course had the local plan. So we've already quite a lot on our plate. We're only going, well, it might be more than 2 years, but we're working on the basis of 2 years. So I would really like to stick with 2 scrutiny committees. And I know how hard the chair of the committee I'm best vice chair of the PAS committee, has worked. But we do have a dedicated scrutiny officer who's come in now, and I think that will help us with the work. So please stick to 2 for the time being. Can I go on? And I'll just say, there's a couple of other things which are really on this section. I'm very keen that the governance model is reviewed a bit annually. I think that's a good thing to have to come to us, as long as it's not too onerous. So I'm pleased about what you've done with other parts. So those are the 2 things on that. Then, I don't know, this is the supplementary estimates. So this is 3.4. Can I go on to talk about that?
Shall we, I think in this instance, why don't we just stick to the scrutiny committee just for now? Let's get that one sorted, I think, because I think that was one of the main things. And I agree, I'm not going to say much, just that I actually agree with you both that 2 scrutiny committees, I think we're in favour of that. I certainly am of that actually staying. Richard, and then Naomi.
Yes, I'd like to bring in the Housing Advisory Board for consideration as well. I know the board is keen to have a meeting of its own to discuss the year and see how it went, see what could be changed. And so I hope that can happen in the next few weeks, so we can actually have them included. So it's the terms of reference of the committee, but also potentially it being a scrutiny committee and not an advisory board. These are things that need to be considered. That's not necessarily my view, but it's something that needs to be, the scrutiny committee, I mean, it's not necessarily my view that there should be a scrutiny committee, but it's something that needs to be looked into. I think the board has had a good year, generally, but it took a long time to bed in, and officers to get used to it. So I think it definitely needs a good review.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Naomi? And then Patrick?
Thank you. I'd also agree 9 months is too early. I very much welcome Richard's call for the Housing Advisory Board to be considered. It is a major part of our work as a council, and it's certainly a major part of my casework. I also would add that even the move to 2 scrutiny committees has been very hard work for chairs and representatives, because we are effectively, it's been a change in our committee membership, and that people have been having to get to grips with new topics, and moving to a single committee model does put an awful lot of strain on representatives. At least having 2 committees allows us to split the work up, and means that we can focus in more depth on the matters coming before those committees. But I do very much welcome that you are flagging up the differences that we have with SCDC, given the fact that we do have a strong possibility of a merger with them on the cards. So up to that point, I think I support the consensus I'm hearing here. There is one point on which I differ, which is the new governance structure effectively leaves minority groups and ungrouped councillors out in the cold. And I'm aware that the remedy for that is not to be the minority group and to win more seats, and it's something that we are actively pursuing. But equally, if a minority group or individual councillors don't feel that they have a voice through the council structure, they will seek that voice in the press. And there's an old proverb about tents and liquid, which I'm not going to repeat here. I'm sure it's familiar to all of you. But I think we'd all want to keep those conversations in the council. And I think particularly if we're moving to no overall control and a smaller difference between the group memberships, then we should also be looking at that representation on the scrutiny committees far more urgently than we're looking at going from 2 to 1 scrutiny committees. So thank you.
Patrick, it's yours.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And before I start on my point about overview and scrutiny, I just want to put on record that I'm so sorry to have missed the officer briefing between 5 and 5:30. I know that a huge amount of work goes into the preparation of those officer reports, briefings rather. So if there's any way I could have a PowerPoint of the briefing in the next few days, that would be fantastic. But I just want you to know that I didn't forget that it was happening. I finished work at 5, so I had to use the time to cycle here. And I didn't want to say it in apologies because I know the briefing is not part of the committee as such. On the issue of overview and scrutiny, I think we might be approaching something like party consensus here. My reason for wanting to echo some of the thoughts we've already heard is that I kind of feel as if we haven't yet had enough time to experience all the benefits of 2, especially in terms of managing workflow. Even if come to unitary we end up in a different place again, okay, fine, but we will have sort of picked up more in the way of compare and contrast, meaningful compare and contrast along the way. And so, yeah, to make it a smoother journey, I think I would agree with the other points that people have said on staying with 2, at least for now. Thanks.
Jamie, it's yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can be quick. I'd echo comments from other members. But one thing I did note from correspondence, I think Councillor Gouthart Wood has echoed this, but the existing chairs were unaware of this view in this report until I raised it with them. So I would just strongly recommend that conversations on this matter are also sort of had with them. They weren't able to make this meeting on late notice, so it would be very good to sort of draw on their knowledge and experience of the past year, as has already been discussed.
Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, so on Councillor Bennett's points, the opposition groups, in fact any councillor, as I understand it, can ask to meet officers. So I think part of the move to scrutiny, the scrutiny system that we're having now, is that perhaps councillors need to be reminded of this. Obviously, we won't want to be inundating you with things that, as ward councillors, members, that are actually just a waste of your time. We have to be mindful of that. But I think that this is where we need to allow ourselves enough time to read the papers as members, and opposition groups need to make sure that they are also ensuring that they are properly briefed. And I think that's up to us, actually, in this new system. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second one, actually, I don't know whether this comes under here, but the Housing Advisory Board, like Councillor Robertson, I don't know that it needs to be a scrutiny committee, but I think it needs to have a bit more teeth. I know it reports direct to Cabinet, but I would like us to be able, with the new renters' rights, to be able to be looking at things like that, perhaps that the members doing deep dives, housing associations, registered social housing providers, maybe we need to be looking at them too, as well as what's happening with our own city homes housing stock. But I would like the terms of reference reviewed for the Housing Advisory Board, and it might be something that the current chairs of the HAB need to talk to officers about outside of here. Thanks.
Are you putting that on the recommendation?
Can we? I think so. Yes.
Please. I'm sorry, Richard.
Just a couple of extra things I forgot. One is the terms of reference. Yes, I think that housing associations or registered social landlords, as we should call them, should have, there should be some discussion about their work dealt with by the advisory board, because our tenants are the same as tenants for RSLs. our tenants have the experience of being tenants and leaseholders as they do for RSLs. So I think there's something to be said for bringing that work into that committee. The other thing is, when we talked about the Constitution last year, there was some work of this committee, the Civic Affairs Committee, which was taken away from it, which is something to do with employment. There is another committee to do with some form of employment. I can't remember what it's called now. But I don't think, has it actually met? Has it actually done anything? Previously, it was a subcommittee of this when we needed it. It was a subcommittee of Civic Affairs when we needed it, I think. But I want to know what has happened to it and whether it should be reviewed. It does seem to me it's something we should not overlook. Thank you.
So were you able to answer that? I don't know the answer to that. Patrick? Don't know the answer myself either, but we'll have to trundle that way unless somebody knows the answer to that and come back. But Naomi, sorry.
I do know there was an employment committee meeting before the last full council because councillors Clough and Howard were at it.
Okay, that's useful, thank you. Okay, so why don't we bottom out the two scrutiny committees? So what we're saying is that just about, I think all of us are saying that we need to keep the two scrutiny committees. And I think we just ought to be clear on that. So is everybody happy with that? Yeah, that's how we all understand each other. That's good. Thank you so much. So what I want to do now, and then actually, we're not going to go to recommendations just yet, but on page 9, the equalities panel. I just wondered if Rachel wants to speak to that. Did you have anything particular? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I think it's quite comprehensive here, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. I think it's part of the same sort of review. The panel's been in existence for 25 years with only minor changes to its terms of reference. And as we know, in May 2025, the Constitution was updated, making the Equalities Panel an advisory board to the Cabinet. So obviously the terms of reference need to be updated to enable the panel to fulfil the function. And the Council is developing an equity strategy and looking into how it can better ensure its decisions or its decision making is informed by people with lived experience of inequalities. It's also considering how it can have a wider impact on issues relating to equity and inclusion beyond those just impacted by council services. So the main updates, as you will see, is to rename the Equalities Panel to the Inclusion and Equity Panel, and to ensure that people's expertise based on their lived experience of marginalisation and discrimination are embedded into the strategic council decisions and panel recommendations and discussions. And obviously we go into more detail, pages 35 to 38, but I think it's important to note that the change of emphasis is around equity, because equity talks to removing barriers, whereas equality has a slightly different meaning. And inclusion is the culture and behaviour that makes people feel that they belong. So I think the change of emphasis is also important. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions for Councillor Wade? Going once, going twice?
I think my comment is you actually have to say, perhaps in the appendix B or somewhere, that this is about removing barriers, so make it explicit, because I think lay people might be a bit confused.
Okay, I'm going to do something appalling now, which I never do. You go back one. Sorry, Councillor Big.
I just had a minor point on this. I mean, no problem with this. It seems like a logical progression from where we are, and so long as it's going to retain the priority for this bundle themes and issues, then I think that's the main thing. But just on a very, very small mechanical point, the Appendix B says that members of it will be appointed by the leader, and then the councillor members of it will be one per political group. I just wanted clarification. That doesn't mean that the political groups don't have the right to nominate who they choose to that. Because it's not totally clear the way it's written. It says appointed by the leader, but then it says one from each group. So I'm sure no group would like the leader of another group choosing people from their group because there are processes that all the political groups have, and I think we would all generally choose someone who is going to add value in this process.
I think that makes perfect sense. I think it's just a wording matter there, Tim, to sort of tidy that up to make that clear. Robert.
Chair, yeah, I think under the Constitution, the Cabinet Advisory Group is appointed by the leader. I think the section in the annex is to make clear the intention would be to appoint, in the normal way, as you discussed, Councillor Bick.
Yeah, so it's just the wording needs a bit tidied up there, yeah. I'm sorry, Naomi, I'm sorry, did I miss you? Sorry.
No, I hadn't put my hand up now, so you didn't miss me, Chair. I was not being forthcoming. I just wanted to say that there has been a bit of confusion as to who is able to attend the qualities panel and what the system is included over the last year, that I have personally found very annoying. So I'd be very keen to see it cleared up. I'd also mention that within my group, we do a lot of work on equality and inclusion, but the people who are most expert on particular aspects of protected characteristics and other barriers to inclusion do change within the group. And I think we'd like to have a bit more flexibility as to who we send, depending on what is going to be discussed. For example, I have a visible disability, but Councillor Tong is much more expert on hidden disabilities and the impact on younger people than I am. And Councillor Clough has more expertise on financial exclusion. So I think we'd like some flexibility to ensure that we send the best person to any panel meeting, and we'd like some assurance that we would be able to send a member subject to political representation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's especially what Robert was saying as well, between Robert and Tim, that we need to ensure that the best person goes forward, and that's what happened. I just want to bounce back to page 8. I'm sorry, that was I don't normally bounce back pages, but I actually there was an item there that we ought to just pull out as well. So just about halfway down, it is therefore proposed by S151 that new supplementary estimates be added to the Constitution to allow Cabinet to approve the additional revenue expenditure up to £250,000 per item. And that was one of the items, Patrick, that the Chief Executive was speaking about at the briefing. But we haven't, I was just in danger of ploughing on without actually bringing us back to that point, and that everybody was happy with that, or if there were any questions or items members wanted to put on that item. I thought you would, Jenny.
Okay, well, I better say I'm actually content with this, but of course in the budget there was an uprating because of inflation. Now you're going to have to remind me exactly what it was. I kind of know, but I think I'm tired at the moment. And this fits in a way with this, but at the risk of this being something that would have required a lot of work, I did wonder apart from looking at what other councils do, whether there was any sensitivity analysis that you could have done quickly or have done quickly or could do quickly, just to show the impact in terms of things not having to come to full council or, you know, impact on the budget. But I recognise that if this is a lot of work, as I say, I'm at, you know, given the uprating that we've had and increased, you know, this is a figure that's been there for a while, that, you know, the uprating is okay.
Tim and Richard. I've got Naomi as well, I'm sorry. So, yeah, it was Naomi first, but, sorry, so Naomi, Tim and Richard, if I may.
I think it was actually Tim and Jamie first. Okay, I just wanted to say I support this in principle because we are increasingly in a much less predictable and more fast-changing world. Doing the council's financial management for an annual budget is, you know, not an appropriate modern method of control. So I think we need to have adjustments like this built in. I would recommend that any limits are indexed and that we agree an appropriate index, because I know in theory we should look at this every year. In practice, we probably won't. And inflation is not yet dead and will probably return at some point. But the last thing is a bit of a caveat, which is one of the things that has really annoyed me about the budget presentation is salami tactics on major projects, where we only approve, say, £1 million at one particular budget point over a project that could have costs up to 100 million. And if we're going to say, OK, Cabinet can make changes up to 1 million on a capital project, I think that should be a capital project where the overall cost is 1 million and not an extra million on a project which could have an open-ended total cost. I don't know if I've explained that clearly. Jodie's nodding, so I think I can shut up.
I'm instinctively a bit of a sceptic about this sort of thing. I just wonder whether Jodie could highlight, maybe it's a similar question to Jenny's. I wonder if Jodie could highlight a couple of occasions during the last year where it's been problematic that we didn't have this.
I happily will. So, no, I'd agree with those points. I think some of it's covered, and Jodie will mention. I guess I'm also just, and I think I can see within the Cabinet model that we will, of course, have opportunity to scrutinise these things, depending which side of it we're on. But I'd still note it's not really mentioned in a forward plan requirement. I just wonder if any decisions like this should be brought forward in the forward plan, just to make sure we've got the safeguards for any kind of scrutiny or challenge. And a really probably petty question, but as a sort of a plain English supporter, is there any way we can call it something other than supplementary estimates? Because it seems like a term designed to make it very unclear about what it actually is. But I don't know if that's, if it's something that's mandated in local government or not.
I wondered that. It's an odd title, isn't it? Richard, you have the last word, and Jodie will respond.
I was going to take us back to the last year before this year, when we spent a lot of time discussing all these changes before we introduced the new constitution. We seem to have overlooked the fact that we should be consulting our groups before we make decisions like this one in particular. I'm afraid I recommend that this one is put back to the groups before being put forward to the council. It should not have been done in the way it has been. So this item on the supplementary estimates I think is laudable, but it needs to go to my Labour group before I can give it approval. The same goes for the other issues. The first one on constitutional arrangements. There isn't a request, there isn't a recommendation to change anything, but to discuss on it. So we were going to discuss whether the scrutiny committees should be 1 or 2. And I also hope that, I was going to ask the chair, when you summarise the first section on the constitutional changes, you only mentioned the scrutiny committees. It was intentional that we would review the Housing Advisory Board as well. I hope that was accepted by the group, by this committee as a whole. The rest of the other items on here, the equalities thing, I think has been to our group, and we're happy with it. But I'm afraid some of the items have not got that far. So that's the position I'm in, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's all received. Yes, I did put, when we come back to the recommendations, I actually did put the, to review the terms and conditions of the Housing Advisory Board as one of the recommendations. I've got that here. So once we come back to the recommendations, we'll add that on. Jodie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and answer the questions in turn. So in terms of kind of uprating of the limits and sensitivity analysis around the budgets, I think clearly the intention would be that those limits would be stated within the Constitution. I think there's a benefit in keeping them quite clear and keeping them as nice round numbers that everybody can remember. And I think the risk with building in an annual CPI increase or something like that is you could end up with a very odd number. The limit's 250,000 now, and in 3 years' time it's 262,127, and it just becomes sort of difficult. I think it's better to keep the round number in people's minds, to keep that potentially under an annual review. And if we reach a point in the future, in 10 years' time, when we say actually it's no longer 250, it should be 300 or 350, that would go through the usual kind of constitutional change process to update those, I guess. In terms of Councillor Bennett's comments around kind of salami approach to approvals, there would be guardrails in place, and actually within the report we have said that related proposals will be aggregated for the purposes of the limit. So, I think practically speaking, if we had a capital project that was, £10 million and for, unforeseen reasons, there had to be an increase, I can see, a supplementary estimate process being used once to increase a budget from 9 million to 10 million or from 10 million to 11 million. And I can see that as being an appropriate use of the process. What wouldn't be appropriate would be then to come back 3 months later and increase it to 12 million, then to 13 using the same process. I think the £1 million limit would have to apply to the supplementary estimates in aggregate, and any further increases would be then referred to full council in line with normal procedure. And the kind of the guardrail around that would be the requirement for the 151 officer to essentially sign off that the correct process has been followed, and then that's then a judgment for the 151 officer as to whether those reports are related or not. In terms of Councillor Bick's questions around principal specific examples, I mean, it's very difficult because clearly we've been managing without this process in place. So when these issues have come up, we've found workarounds, which are maybe not ideal workarounds. So a couple of examples this year, we've had some stuff where we've been able to use the Transformation and Reinvestment Fund that was approved by full council to fund some one-off pressures that have arisen. For example, I'm just thinking one practical example was additional costs associated with the setting up of the Greater Cambridge Impact organisation, and there were some additional legal costs that came through, and we were able to use a transformation fund as that had been approved by full council. But if we hadn't have had that fund, or if the funds weren't available there, potentially we would have had to take a relatively small amount through a full council decision process. Or we would have had to look to divert budgets from elsewhere. Just practically speaking, I have conversations with colleagues where they'll want budget to do something, maybe introduce a new post or something mid-year, and we end up in a position effectively of delaying the work. So rather than getting started with something in November or December, we'll say, we'll just park that and we'll put that in as a budget bid, and, you know, it will be approved, but it just delays potentially us doing something. So this is about, I guess, making us a bit more agile, a bit more able for us to respond to things that may occur during the year, but without losing the openness and the transparency, because I think what's really key in here, as Councillor Diel picked up, was that the process does require a public cabinet report, so there is an opportunity to have that debate in public and to have that transparency. In terms of forward plan requirements, I think the important thing to flag is that nothing in this process would override the existing requirements in the Constitution around forward notification of decisions, and particularly around the key decision process. So this isn't a process for taking key decisions. That would still follow the existing process, including the 28-day notification requirement. I think to some extent the whole point of this process is to make us more agile. So if you start bolstering the notification requirements too much beyond what's already there, then you almost defeat the object of having the process. So I can see where these, you know, where these are smaller amounts coming through, they're not going to be key decisions because this wouldn't be an appropriate process to use for key decisions. But they would still be subject to the normal publication requirements for cabinet decisions of at least 5 clear working days. And where we know these things are coming up in advance, of course, we would do everything we can to get them on the forward plan at the earliest possible opportunity. But the whole purpose is about being more agile, so we won't always necessarily know that something is coming, you know, a significant period of time in advance of the meeting. And in terms of the term supplementary estimates, yes, I mean, that's a term that's used by a lot of councils. Appreciate it doesn't really meet the plain English test, you know, and I'm more than happy to look at that if members have other suggestions. We're not tied to that in any way. So if there's a better form of language that better describes what we're trying to achieve, then I'd absolutely support that. Thank you.
Okay, in that case then, we'll bounce back to the recommendations unless anybody's got anything else to say on this item. Not particularly?
Have we discussed the member officer protocol yet?
We haven't actually discussed it now. That's sort of basically what I was asking. That's about the only thing there is left on these recommendations. So if you have some views on that, please.
Yes, if that's okay. So, no, there's things to welcome in here. So I do understand, you know, I guess it's bringing in new requirements for the LGA. I did notice sort of new requirements for officers to inform political groups about their briefings, etc., which I'm very keen to support. There was one thing that I did note is on, it's on the numbers on the pack is quite difficult, but on page 26 of the pack we've got the existing protocol, and on section 3.2 I think there's quite a useful clause, particularly for opposition members, that just sort of really highlights the potential conflicts that can arise through closeness between, you know, the executive, or now the cabinet, and senior officers. And I don't think that's really reflected in the new protocol. It's sort of probably picked up under section 4.1 about close working relationships, but not done in quite the same clear way. Yes, I'd be. I think there is some real value in kind of highlighting that point, and I just wonder about the opportunities to sort of tighten up this document before it's sort of recommended by us to council as per the recommendations. Because yes, there are also, well, what worries me on review, and this is probably picks up on something that Councillor Robertson also said, I don't think all members have had a chance to really review this in detail yet. I have flagged it to them, but obviously there's, I think we would want wider feedback. And from my own observations, having sort of left the council in 2022 and sort of then, you know, returned last year, I now seem to have less ability to sort of contact officers directly around specific, you know, case working issues. And I think that seems to be part of the design, but also as a councillor, it does mean I feel a little less empowered sometimes to kind of, you know, get into the detail, which can be very valuable, both in, you know, supporting residents and for me, my more general understanding of, you know, what's working well at the council and on occasion what isn't. And I guess I sort of worry that this continues that sort of process around, I think there's mentions of going through a communication centre, which gives me pause for concern around, discouraging councillors from, particularly new councillors, from kind of being able to go directly to officers when they need to.
Naomi?
I share a lot of my colleagues' concerns. I'd also add that what changes procedures in practice is not having a written document. No matter how well or badly it may be drafted, it's actually training people on it. And I think something on procedures and how we might work as members and officers should go into the induction programme and be open to existing councillors. I'd also like to say that I too have felt that officer communications have been less forthcoming, and there's been a gradual decline since I was elected. I think realistically that is because there is increased pressure on officers and that we have fewer people trying to do more, and that's something that we do understand and relate to. But while I do not necessarily feel I have a right to be frustrated, I do feel frustrated on occasion. Thank you.
That's it. Oh, Richard, no, I don't mind.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead too far, but on page 31, the section dealing with involvement of elected members in public meetings, I've often seen officers fielding quite difficult, even feisty questions from members of the public. New development public forums are a classic example where at times when I've seen this happen. And officers have gone to considerable trouble to lay out meaningful presentations about proposed developments, just to stick with that example. And coming along to such meetings, many well-intentioned and concerned residents, but sometimes some very angry residents, where officers have fielded those questions, and sometimes angry questions, admirably. And I sometimes wish that officers would use us, the councillors, as the buffers that I think we are supposed to be. And that business in 11.1 about the timing of meetings, just recently I've noticed that there's been a clash with full council and meetings of the North Framework Cambridge development. It happened last week and it happened in the autumn. I mean, to a certain extent, the officer responses to the public questions will be the more expert. So perhaps I shouldn't be weeping. Certainly shouldn't be weeping. I probably shouldn't even be feeling left out. But knowing as I do that some of those meetings can be quite animated, I sort of feel that I want the officers to make more use of me in terms of having that, being that buffer. Just a thought. Thank you.
Richard?
It's a valuable thought as well. It's very valuable because it shows you the basics of what we're trying to do. We have mutual respect for each other as officers and councillors, but the role of each of us it's blurred sometimes, and sometimes it is important that the councillor takes the buffer, takes the stick rather than officers having to cover it. So it's an interesting concept. I do think this is another one where we need to look at it with our group and come back again. Sorry to say. The points being made are very valid, and I think we ought to review this on the relationship between senior officers and, not just senior officers and councillors. Does need to be carefully reviewed because of the importance of it.
Any response from the learning benches? I see, it's very focal, you see, it's what it is. Sorry.
Apologies, I have a jelly brain at the moment and didn't mention everything that I should have said. One of the things I wanted to welcome was the emphasis on communication with ward councillors. Officers are the experts on the council's business. Ward councillors are the experts on residents. Your City Rich picture was based on 1,000 resident interviews across the city. In a ward that we are contesting, we will carry out 3,000 resident interviews in 3 months. We see a lot more of the residents. We know a lot more about how they feel. And there have been times when presentations have actually been done in a way which is almost guaranteed to upset residents. And if we are consulted as ward councillors in advance, we could maybe sort of steer people away from open confrontation and actually have a more amicable and constructive meeting. But we can't do that if we're not consulted in advance. So my plea is, you are the experts on what the council does. We are the experts on the wards. And I'd like to see us working together better. So thank you, Patrick, for raising that point. It's a very good one.
Tim.
I mean, I think there's a danger of getting lost in some rather important items of detail where people have reservations, and the majority of the material here, which I think I wouldn't argue with, and I think it's probably an improvement. But I do think the outstanding points of reservation do need to be addressed, and whether we should ask officers to reconsider on a couple of aspects of this and take account maybe of broader council, the opportunity for broader councillor feedback. I mean, my own belief is that, as Councillor DL was saying, that 3.2 of the existing protocol ought to be more clearly and obviously present in the content of the new one. I think that going back to the covering report, that there's something about the additive effect of 7.2 and 7.4 on page 18, which unavoidably feels to me like that's trying to cut councillors out of casework. And I'm sorry, but every elective system in the world, elected politicians will regard a very high percentage of what they do as advancing casework on behalf of individual constituents. And to say that we have to use the call centre, I find giving us none of the benefits of having been sent to do the job of casework, and all of the disadvantages that the public have in bringing things to us. So I think there is an incentive in the system for us not to divert everything from the available public channels, and that's our own time. You know, we have the ability, and I'm sure we use it to wean people off us if that's becoming excessive, and to help them use the public channels, and we do. But I just think that the additive effect of 7.2 and 7.4 is really working against our democratic role. We can show up at committees and raise our hands on broad policies across the council, but it's the casework that tells us whether things work or not. And it's a key resource to us to know how to question and challenge some policy proposals that get brought to us. And so it's the flip side of the coin of our role of people who aim to influence council policy. So I feel quite strongly that 7.2 and 7.4 do need to be considered again. And I also want to mention, all the numbering's rather strange. On page 19, it goes back to 7.3, but there are how many 7.3s here? So the second 7.3 on page 19, I think also, for me, waiting up to 7 days it's not good enough, and it's also longer than some of the councils, quite close to us, considerably. And obviously there can be exceptions that we're all grown up and can recognise, but when you put this sort of thing down on paper, I'm afraid it has the habit in an organisation of becoming the norm. And I just think we should be aspiring to something a bit better than that and a bit more competitive to best practice right around us, our nearest neighbour.
I would also note, just to be positive, that my experience is it's always much faster than 7 days because we've got an excellent team of officers who do respond. So we can probably reflect that in this.
Like Councillor Dilliel, I think it is really 7 working days. I would expect to wait before a response. I'm glad you mentioned who does what, because there has been, with some of the who does what documents that are sent out, it only lists directors and senior officers. And often recognising we don't want to put junior officers on the front line, the queries might be better directed to them or to the middle layers. I do have some worry in that, I'm dealing with one at the moment, where the understanding of a councillor's role when they're on a regulatory committee and the process, they're frustrated because they say, you're talking about process, but it's a regulatory committee where the processes have to be followed. And it's really very difficult sometimes for the councillor who is acting as a buffer for officers. But I think it might be useful in an appendix to sort of have some examples, particularly where you're dealing with something like planning, which is regulatory or licensing, how to approach this. Or it's got to be part of the induction. I would like to see it as something, it's detailed, but as a separate appendices somewhere, how you approach these, because it's also trying to explain things to residents as well. Okay, thank you.
And I apologise for my jelly brain and having more than one bite of a cherry. But I think part of the problem is that I think these are basically a good framework, but they've been written by somebody who doesn't really, our councillor role is a bit like an iceberg. Officers only see part of it. And I think perhaps there needs to be a bit more discussion and explanation of the bit that you don't see, or only see the surface element of. And that is why, my colleagues over there and I are having some problems with the guidelines. Because, for example, saying, you should encourage people to use the call centre, most of the queries we have on casework are because someone has tried to use the call centre and hasn't had a good answer, or hasn't had an answer at all.
Okay, quite a lot of comments there. I have to say more than I expected, but as Councillor Pitt pointed out, I actually had 7.2 and 7.4 as well, but I actually did miss the second 7.3, But those were actually the only 2 points that I was going to speak on, but I don't need to now. So, responses, gentlemen?
Okay, it's been really helpful, and thank you very much for the feedback. Maybe if it's helpful, just step back and try and say a few things that this is intending to do. The first is, compared to what we have at the moment, there's much clearer guidance for officers here about how they engage and when they should inform ward councillors, which hasn't been the case. So that is really important, I think. Earlier involvement. The other thing that it does is it provides clearer guidance because our current code of conduct is pre-social media. So at times now, officers working in community settings are informing members about a meeting that's happening in a local area, but it's not a council meeting. So it's clearer about when officers should be very forthcoming with a local ward councillor about a meeting that the council is arranging in a ward to ensure that they are invited. So I think those are two strong things. We can tighten up language around familiarity. There is language at 4.1, as you noted, Councillor Bick. The 7.3 various paragraphs were an amalgamation, and I think having spoken to the leadership team, I think the intention is probably threefold. Firstly, we get queries that could be dealt with not via an email, and so in who does what, the first bit of guidance for members is, can you answer the question or find the information online? And if you've got a query, can it be dealt with by the call centre? If it's more complicated, in this new guidance, I think you're right, it says 7 days in the back. In the front report, it says 5. So we would be moving from the current 7 working days to 5 working days. I agree with Councillor Dale that we could be more competitive here. So feel free to recommend that. But I think it's trying to say, if you're going to contact an officer, don't always contact the chief executive or a director. Contact the right person, not the most junior person, because often the junior person either gets put under, needs guidance from their manager about how to handle a complex case. So it's saying, go in at the right level, we should respond more quickly, we should be more proactive. Where it's a complex issue, we should get back to you straight away and say, this is a complex issue, this is how we intend to deal with it, is that all right? Because we think we're not going to do it based on our current workload. I think Councillor Bennett's rightly pointed out that workloads are higher now. So what we're trying to do is the things that are easy to address, is there a way that as a member you can find that information quickly and clearly? If it's a piece of casework where you're acting on behalf of a resident, casework, which is vital, we're not trying to undermine members' role in casework. Often we get requests from councillors where it's a request for service. So that's quite easy. That's a call to the contact centre for a request for service. If it's a complaint, we're saying, and a member is acting on behalf of a resident for a complaint, rather than email exchanges, that should be logged straight into our complaint system. So it's dealt with and tracked. And that means every complaint we get, we can at the end of the year say, have we dealt with these complaints on time? There may be more complex cases where the guidance is saying, if you want to engage and act as an advocate on behalf of the resident, it's always helpful to know whether you've got permission from the resident, particularly where it involves sharing of confidential information. So that's clear in here as well. So overall, I think, and we can go away and work on the drafting, but the intention is that if it's simple inquiries, can it be dealt with via the contact centre or online or via reporting it? That saves us time. If it's more complex, contact a manager, and they'll make sure that they get back to you and it's logged. If it's a complaint, we'll log it and track it in the complaint system. If you're acting as an advocate, then if you've got prior consent from the resident, great. But what we're also saying, rather than 7 days, we should do it in 5 working days, so a shorter time. But if you think we could do better, then the committee could recommend that as well. So what we're trying to do is a bit of a compromise here, is channeling the right inquiries in the right way. So some of my colleagues are concerned when very junior officers get inquiries from some members to do things that aren't within their scope of authority, and they act on them. And that comes back down to the member officer protocol outlined in here about making sure that we don't put junior officers under undue pressure. It's very clear. So that's one concern that sometimes arises. There's other concerns that have arisen where member inquiries always go to directors to get a response, in the view that by telling the director or the chief executive you'll get a quicker resolution. And I think it's unfair when officers are very overworked that always, if you escalate it straight away to a very senior officer, your particular resident should take precedent over that officer's day-to-day workload. And so I think what we're saying is there's a bit more of a dialogue around how we deal with these things in future.
Okay, guys, I just want to remind you we spent over an hour on this now. We've got plenty of other business to be going on with, but I'll take another couple of questions, but no more. So I've got Richard and Tim and Naomi, and then we'll come to a decision what we're going to do. Oh, good. I must stop wearing the very vocals. Richard.
I just wanted to just clarify, is Robert saying that he will revise, this will be revised along the lines of which he just expressed, about complex issues, for instance, number of days? That's good.
Tim?
I was just going to say that the way Robert was talking about that in that response fills out a better version of the real world than the words on the paper. And I mean, I think it has to be reworded, because I don't think, we're not necessarily a million miles away, but the rewording would cover a lot of ground, and I don't think we're going to do that today, are we?
So, yeah, that's how I understood it. That's all I was actually just going to say then. So the way you put it to us does make a lot more sense. So it's just how we handle this now, because, of course, we've got a deadline for the AGM, have we not? So that's our biggest barrier at the moment. So would there be an opportunity to actually reword some of these items that we've spoken about, and perhaps email that out to the members? And then would it be acceptable to have that feedback via, having just said not everything via email, having just said that, on this occasion, would that be acceptable for members to feed that information back as soon as we can? Because there won't be, I'm guessing, Dan, there wouldn't be actually time to bring this back to another meeting before the AGM, and I don't know how we're fixed for time factor there.
Potentially, you could still have a short civic affairs meeting before the AGM to sign it off, so to speak. If most of the comments are done via email, we could just present it, and it could just be then forwarded on to the AGM on the 21st of May.
Fine. So if we cover
members
these points between us by email, we should be okay for time, because I'm wondering about that. Well, that was my other thought, really, because there were some comments about taking this back for a wider review with the groups before we actually signed it off. Would we? And I'm fine with that, because there'll be more comments. So in that respect, if we felt there was time to do that, if we didn't have an AGM looming, if you like, then we'd have much more scope to actually do that. In practice, I've got no issue with that. I think it's a fair idea. But whether we can make that work timing-wise, I don't know. So I guess I'm sort of thinking as I'm going along here, I'm guessing if we get those, the revised version out, get the views of the members here, and then would we then have time, would they have time to take it to their respective groups and bounce back in time for the AGM? That's what I'm looking at. And that also takes in item 3 as well, that Councillor Robertson asked for, and I think Councillor Dale did as well. They'd like to take that back to groups for their review, and Naomi, of course, take that back to their groups for review of those 2 items before we pass them. So I'd like to be able to do that. I'm sort of just asking the question if we're going to have the timescale to be able to make that happen.
Chair, if we got the revised, and there's been a number of comments on the code of conduct, if we got something back to you within a week, you could circulate it to members. I think trying to conclude the discussion by ideally, by the end of March would be good, because then we're entering a pre-election period. People will be busy, members will be busy. So, and we can schedule a civic affairs meeting to deal with the AGM, probably the week of the AGM. Yeah. Chair, while I've got, can I make one other quick point? I think just to be crystal clear around the proposal in the equalities panel. So I think the proposal would be, as I understand it from the leader, that the political membership of the equalities panel would be made up of the lead cabinet member, and then the groups would appoint a representative, political groups. I suppose, just to cover off Councillor Bennett's point, I think it would be a matter probably for her group and the chair to discuss who they felt was appropriate to send to particular meetings. And that would be, I don't think we cover off that in the terms of reference, but it would be a conversation to be had. Yeah.
Okay, so in that case then, if we'll go to recommendations, but we'll leave out recommendations 1 and 3 on page 3. Leave out the recommendations 1 and 3 for voting on today, with the exception that we've discussed them, and they will be revised as discussed and then circulated to the group for further comment by those groups. So with that in mind on points 1 and 3, and also on the second half we have 4 and 5, but we now also have a 6, which is to review the terms of reference for the Housing Advisory Board, which we'd like to add as a recommendation, so as recommendation 6. Is that all clear? Are we okay with that?
It's not just the terms of reference, it's whether it is a scrutiny committee as well.
Fine, that will come into it as well, yeah, fine. Unless you wanted that actually worded. Did you want that actually worded? Okay.
Maybe it's the same thing. So.
Okay. Sam?
Just a bit of clarification then, as part of, if you're adding that recommendation about the timing of that, because the other recommendations are more about, I wasn't imagining a full review would then come as part of what the paper is.
So sorry, Sam, just to be clear there. So what you're saying is that you wouldn't want to see item recommendation 6 as being as time critical as the others?
I think what Sam is saying is that it would go to council as a recommendation, that subsequently, if council adopted the recommendation, then there would be a review. I think what we can't do is review the Housing Advisory Board now, report back to this committee in advance with recommendations for the AGM. But we could do a review afterwards if that's what...
That's sort of how I understood it anyway, that it would go to full, so I didn't really explain it very well, that would go to full council with the other items, and that it would be full council that would be actually voting on that item for it to happen after the AGM. That's how we all... That's what was in my head. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. We've been here all day, haven't we? It's getting a bit tiring now.
Chair, I don't think I can accept that. I think it's essential that the Housing Advisory Board meets in the next few weeks and it discusses its reviews the past and makes recommendations. And you'll have to accept this. I have a personal interest in this because I will not be on the council after the AGM. And if you want my advice for the year that we've just dealt with, please have it in the next few weeks.
I don't think that's going to be practical. I can't see that happening. I get your point, Richard, but on a practical level, I just can't see that being practical. I really can't, unless anybody wishes to jump in and tell me I'm wrong there. If you do feel that way, then no. Okay.
Why does it have to be before the end of March? I don't understand, why can't we use April? It's in the election period, I agree, but that's the only, if that's the only reason, I'm sure the meetings can be held during the day anyway. Don't have to be held in the evening.
Happy to take advice on that, guys?
I'm, given the personal circumstances, happy to take individual feedback so that we don't miss those reflections as we go through. But we have I mean, just from an office perspective, we haven't planned for any particular review this side of the AGM. It's not to say we couldn't start something, but given the conversation today about thoroughness and engagement with wider members, I just don't, I don't see it as practical.
Okay, so given time for Richard to feed in his thoughts on that and be included in the review, which was just for time constraints, which would then happen after the AGM, but Richard would have had a chance to actually put his points forward and his views forward. And although he won't be on the council after that, I mean, I don't suppose there's anybody here that would say we wouldn't listen to what he had to say thereafter anyway. That to me would be a sensible, it's just a practical way forward. So he's not a councillor, so what? You know, he's still got the same experiences and would still be able to feed in with information and views that we would value. So personally, I would welcome that anyway. Does that work for you?
No.
That's as far as we can go, I think, Richard, to be practical. I can't see it working any other way. But your views will still be sought. You still have an opportunity to do that, and they can still be sought and taken care of, taken account of after the AGM. There isn't another practical way forward, Richard, sorry, that I can see, unless, again, someone can actually tell me that that's not viable.
Can I come up with another suggestion, which would be which I think was in, you were already thinking about, Councillor Robertson, which was to have a meeting between the chairs of the Housing Advisory Board, the current ones, and Sam or Samantha and the Cabinet Member for Housing to sort of have a discussion about this. I mean, it would have been ideal if we could have had this in January or February, some kind of meeting to discuss this. But I am mindful that, you know, we're running into the pre-election period.
That's the problem.
I'm very happy to start the process as I've already outlined and have the right meetings. But again, just reflecting on the conversations today about thoroughness and not having seen even one cycle of meetings through, to do a deep review and some of the recommendations and things being presented here, I just don't think we would do any of that justice in line with what's already been said today. So very happy to meet, as you've just outlined, to make sure that we've shared the experiences of both the scrutiny committee that does have the responsibility for everything that has been discussed today around housing already, and the Housing Advisory Board that is there to manage the HRA. But, that's probably really as far as I think the officers can take this.
Robert, did you wish to look like you were going to come in there?
Well, I feel Richard's dilemma, but I think rather what you could do, Richard, maybe is organise just an informal meeting of the politicians who sit on the Housing Advisory Board now on this subject, and maybe someone from the community's housing side could attend, and you can make sure that you put on record your points sooner rather than later.
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, that's, I think, as far as we can go on that item at the moment. So with all those updates, if everybody's still clear with that, then just if we can just show our vote on the recommendations with all the caveats we've got there. So basically 1 and 3 being deferred for now, which will come back, as we've already said, be circulated and then comments included. And item 6 with the terms of reference for the Housing Advisory Board. So all those in favour of all of that? All happy?
Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Okay, so that takes us to page 41. Item 6, recommendations are on page 41, and I think Jonathan's going to take this. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, and good evening to members of the committee. So this item is the risk management strategy and framework. Just by way of quick introduction, although I'm talking through the report this evening, I'd like to give thanks to Jane Wilson, our Chief Operating Officer, who's written the report. We're also joined online by Stephanie Fisher in my team, who's an integral part of the risk management framework and operation at the Council. So just to start off with, the last major update we had of these documents was back in 2021. We have lots of little interim updates, but that's the last big one. And while the sort of world of risk management hasn't changed radically overnight, over the past few years, we've had some big changes in the Council. We've had organisational structural change, we've had introduction of a new performance management framework, which came to this committee, and we've also had the revised governance model we've been talking about. So now that those have started to land, it was a good point to go in and have a deeper review of both the strategy and the framework. The sort of strategy talks about how we're planning to manage risk effectively over the longer term. The framework is more the tools and guidance, the toolkit of how we do that. Now, because this document doesn't come with that much frequency to the committee, it's helpful to just cover sort of like how it fits into the governance arrangements. So the role of sort of Civic Affairs and Audit Committee is to really oversee the effective governance of risk management and sort of like be satisfied that there are good, effective tools in place. What will happen in terms of approving the document and the strategy, that will be going to Cabinet in line with our new constitution. That will be going to Cabinet for the March committee. But we do like to bring the documents here to Civic Affairs and Audit Committee for sort of oversight. And we do that regularly. For example, I think it was in February 2024, we brought quite an update, an interim update. And then we also did, in the last sort of 9 months, we did a revision to sort of the scoring guidance to keep pace with sort of inflation. So we do like to keep this committee engaged. Now, the revised document itself is on page 45 of your agenda packs. We've had quite a good presentational refresh of this document this time, and sections have moved around. So that does mean that it wasn't practical for us to bring back a track changes version, which I often like to do where I can. It was just easier to bring a clean version to the committee. But to talk through some of the main changes there, we've revised our risk appetite statement. Hopefully it's more easier to read. There's been obviously a lot of change since 2021 when we first drafted it. So we wanted to make sure that it was effective, especially in sort of the context of where we are with the sort of like local government reorganisation around the corner. Make it very realistic and pragmatic to the task ahead. Fraud risk, that's on page 49. We've reflected that in this document because there's new legislation, the Economic Crime and Transparency Act, which requires us to have a sort of fraud risk register in place, which we already sort of recorded fraud risks, but this is really giving it a lot of sort of visibility and presence. It's good to have that captured in the document because it demonstrates our sort of commitment to that. Moving forward to page 54, risk scoring. We updated the guidance on likelihood scoring, taking on feedback from colleagues in the leadership team. As we're going through the review, we realised there were better ways to really sort of communicate that. And that's important because we want all officers to be scoring things consistently because that helps us prioritise all the records which are in the register. So improving that guidance was helpful. On page 56, we have a section which is risk categories. Now, when we come up with risks, we like to categorise them. It helps us keep track of it and sort of inform trends and get better insights. We reviewed that. We actually rationalised it down from 21 to 18 categories. Some of the ones in there which we removed were just not really being used. Again, we want to make this as an easy tool, an effective tool for officers to use as much as possible. So we just improved that based on our experience over the past few years. And then I would say that on page 63, we recognise organisational change. We've got an appendix there about roles and responsibilities. It's a supplementary document. We needed to keep that updated for the latest sort of officers and their roles in the council. And the presentation, we've had a real big focus upon making it easy to read, make it nice and reader friendly. And you can see we've put a lot of links into the document there, which signpost to supplementary documents. So hopefully it is an improvement. So the next steps will be on after this committee will be to take it to Cabinet for sort of final approval. I'll stop there. Happy to take comments or questions.
Naomi?
I'd like to thank Jonathan for this very comprehensive and well-written report. I particularly enjoyed the glossary and the white swans and the grey rhinos. And they seem a big improvement on some of the terms used in public practice, which do turn the air rather blue, which is something that a Labour council should obviously avoid. So I welcome that. I just have a rather stupid query, which is, Jonathan, do you produce an overall summary of what you perceive the council's key risks are? I mention this because I know we've had a lot of discussion recently about risks connected with AI and with cybercrime. And if you do produce a sort of a risk SWOT analysis, I think we'd all like to see it, even if it was on pink pages. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you first of all for the feedback. There's a lot of terminology within the risk management world, so trying to make it easy to understand is key. In terms of the key risks of the council, it is very dynamic for sure, but the key risks at the top tend to be a bit more static. The way that we've developed our risks is quite integrated. We have a lot of operational risks, and they feed up to the top level risks. So there's a lot of strong linkage, which allows the sort of flexibility at the lower level, whilst keeping those major risks at the top fairly static. What we're trying to do with the adoption of the performance management framework, which is now having more regular reporting, is to pick up and report on those risk management trends. So anything that's real importance will be featured in there. Anything that's big major changes that we need to bring for sort of members' awareness, again, a great opportunity to reflect that. And behind the scenes, officers have done a lot of work over the past sort of 12 months to really make sure that that sort of system is in place. So yeah, they will have a presence.
Thank you. So is there a sort of a list of key risks at the moment, and do we get to see it, and how often does it change? Sorry to keep harping on the same point.
I mean, the frequency of how often it changes is dynamic. We have at least quarterly checkpoints. So it'll be at least that, but officers, of course, are free to change at any time within that quarterly checkpoint. It will be reported through the performance management framework, which goes through to Cabinet.
Jamie?
Yes, thank you. I echo comments. It's a very good report. Yeah, and I guess I know I'm probably going to be the annoying pedant on this, but yeah, with the recommendations on the item 2, I completely agree with it, but I think there's always that difficulty in defining what minor is. And we probably don't want to do that. But then I guess would there be a mechanism for just making sure that members are informed of any such changes? I don't know if that would be either reporting that to this committee the next occasion or some other mechanism. I don't know if you'd have a recommendation.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question, a fair challenge. It's a bit of a judgment call as to whether it warrants a report on its own or not. But what I would say, we've introduced a quarterly governance risk and control update report. We've got the next one coming up on the agenda. So that's a bit more than just like a pure sort of internal audit report. It's really to report on the whole framework. That gives us a sort of section, a window to pick up and sweep some of those items we want to report them to the committee without having to go through a whole sort of formal dedicated report. So yes, we can certainly capture those and feed them back.
Richard?
I think the key to this whole business is training. To me, if you don't have a good trainer showing you how to think the unthinkable about what could happen, before you worry about grading it, just think what the potential problems are. And giving some really good examples in training is essential. So I would, if there is this mention of it, but I would hope that the forms of training that are developed are wide-ranging and effective as they could be.
Absolutely, training is so important. So I kind of put personally sort of training into two camps. There's one about how to use the system effectively and how to score risks effectively and how to sort of communicate and bring them all together, because the whole sort of risk framework environment can be very large and broad in scope. But the second thing is about getting people to think in that space and communicate effectively. Certainly in sort of from the internal audit side, part of our advisory role is to really sort of communicate where we're seeing trends, and we do that internally. We have sort of risk briefings from time to time, obviously have management meetings too. So there are lots of sort of vehicles to communicate potentially emerging issues. And one thing that we will do as well, we keep an eye on new risks which are being added by managers to the system. On their own, they might not seem like big issues, but we can perhaps see through better insight any sort of trends emerging which in aggregate might be worth getting other people to think about. So, no, absolutely, it's training how to use the system, but training upon those topical themes as well. And we definitely try and do as much of that as we can.
Okay, are we all done? Okay, I know Tim's not here, but I think we can go to the recommendations. He's not here, but are you okay with that, Jamie? Okay. In that case then, all those in favour of those recommendations, please show. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for that, Jonathan. I believe the next item, item 7, is also yours, isn't it? So that's where I thought we were. Yeah. So, okay, so item 7 on page 67, and so that will be back to Jonathan again, so you're earning your money tonight.
Thank you very much. So we're trying to bring back a more regular governance, risk and control update reports to the committee. So there'll be smaller bite-sized chunks, what we've done in the past, but with an increased frequency. So that's what this report is. Its sort of purpose is to really talk about things that internal audit are doing, but also bring to the surface other relevant topical issues around governance, risk and control, to help basically also the committee be more effective as well, and help us to sort of really bring topical matters to you. So I suppose diving into the reports, we go to page 72. The first thing that I would talk about is audit updates. We've completed one review since we last provided an update to the committee. That was around the tenant satisfaction measures. This is a data quality review. It's the second time that we've done it and provided assurance. It's about a new requirement to provide data to the regulator of social housing. So whilst that sort of process gets sort of embedded, it's really helpful for us to do a sort of quality assurance review. I think overall, in the data we looked at, there were no concerns, but to really be able to improve our level of assurance, we'd be able to access some supplementary data, which is gathered through sort of external surveys. No real concerns there, it's done independently, but I think just to enable us as internal audit to see the whole process from end to end, if we can pick that up as part of the next review that we'll do, because we will come back and do this next year as well, that will certainly help us provide that fuller assurance to the committee. So yes, overall that's really a tiny low risk, but it's something we would like to do. And overall that's provided reasonable assurance that the controls are working effectively, which is very good. In other updates that I'd come to, I think on page 73, I talk about a couple of other reviews that we've got in progress. One is grant certification. We're just waiting for a few bits of paperwork to be finalised, but our main testing has been completed, and that allows us to provide positive assurance on that. We'll pick that up in the next review, but just to let you know, testing is completed. And also we're adding in as a short-term piece of work to the plan, some work around transparency, just because there have been some new requirements put out there. So we haven't got any concerns, but just to make sure that we're picking up and responding to that properly, we'll pick that up as a very quick, short piece of review. In terms of overall assurance, it's a reasonable level of assurance across the whole control environment. That continues to be the same as our last reports. One thing this has added value is that rather than report this once per year, we can report it more regularly to you. So there was a sort of increase or decrease, we could bring that to your attention earlier on. But it continues to be the same, and that will feed into the annual governance statements for next year. In terms of internal audit standards, on page 74, we're working to new standards which were introduced in the year. And I think it's positive. We've come up with a lot of actions to improve the way that we work. We've done all the urgent ones. Those have all been implemented, and we're making good progress at implementing the remainder. We've done 11 since we last reported to the committee. Of those, 2 big major ones I've highlighted for your awareness. Root cause analysis, a very important tool that we use in internal audit, but there's an expectation that we do it as a standardised approach now in all our reviews. So we've had to develop tools for the auditors, had to do a lot of updates to our back office systems to accommodate that, which we've done. And then training, again, a very important sort of topic, not just for the team, but also to our customers as well, our stakeholders, what root cause analysis means for them. So that's in place. And the second one is reviewing our methodologies, which is a very fancy way of saying our sort of operating procedures, our manual. We've gone through a full review of that to the new standards. We've also taken the opportunity to sort of digitise it, break it down into smaller bite-sized chunks, which makes it more accessible for the team. We've probably got a better chance of staying on top of it and keeping it updated. Certainly easier to cross-reference and hopefully more engaging for the team to use. The next thing I would probably highlight there briefly on that report is just in terms of team resources. We've been waiting for a while for a new apprenticeship scheme to be launched. We've had positive news that hopefully that's going to be starting from April now this year. So we've done a lot of preparatory work for it a long time ago. It's now a case of engaging with the training providers now, and hopefully we'll be able to use that to get some apprenticeships into the team, which is very good positive news. And on page 77, again, what I like to put in these reports, just for your awareness, we have topical updates, and we've got a couple in there. Just news items, one around sort of risk management in terms of the impact of local government reorganisation, some guidance published by the LGA, very, very helpful, and also some more risk management guidance coming from Sector, which is an organisation that sort of provides guidance on housing-related matters. So 2 helpful bits of resources there. And that's the end of that report, but I hope you find it a useful document.
I'd like to thank Jonathan for this report. It helps me sleep at night a bit better, knowing that we have a full modern internal audit service and not just one of the old-fashioned, sort of small calibre ones. I'd just like to ask some very small questions. Before I do, I just am really pleased to hear that's progress on with the apprenticeship. I think that it is really difficult getting young people to move into internal audit. It's seen as very much the Cinderella of the profession. And I really hope that you can communicate that not all internal auditors are equal, and that it can be a good way to have an overview of what an organisation does and a great learning path. And I wish you every bit of luck with that. I just wanted to ask a small question about Hug 2, which is another of these pesky warm home grants that we've had inflicted upon us. And I'd just like to ask, what was the outcome of your review? Because I know we had to send back a lot of the Hug money, just as we've had to with Every Up with Lad and all the other warm home grants. So did your work cover anything we could have done to actually grab more of that grant money, as well as ensuring that we've done the grant forms right? And if so, are there conclusions that we'll be putting into practice? Thank you.
Thank you, first of all, for the feedback on the apprenticeships. Yes, we also need to find some apprenticeships first, but it's absolutely positive news that the scheme is up and running. I'm a big fan of promoting the profession, because lots of people don't understand what internal audit is. So any opportunity I have to promote it, I often take. In terms of the second point around the HUG2, it was a grant certification review. So it isn't a sort of value-added review around how the whole scheme operates and works. There are mechanisms and internal lessons learned, I understand, which get fed back to central government about how that process can be improved. The role of what we were doing there is literally a certification, making sure that all the sort of money was accounted for and spent correctly. So it was limited within those confines, just for the context, but that's come back okay.
Thank you. I thought you'd say that.
Any other questions? Patrick, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just very, very quickly, thank you, Jonathan. Great report. Root cause analysis. Can you say a little bit more about the root cause analysis? Do we mean, is it an extra bit of software, or is it the root cause analysis is making adaptations to the way we do the audit process? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I could talk about root cause analysis at great length. There's so much management theory about that, and if anyone ever wants a committee briefing, I'd be happy to do that. The way that we're adopting it within the team is focusing on the really big ticket items. So the objective is that if, say, for example, there's great opportunity for improvement or something that's gone wrong, is to really delve into it and say, well, what was the root cause? Because we could try and fix the problem, or we could take it back to the root cause and try and prevent it happening again. So it's really trying to extract those lessons learned and then share it throughout the broader organisation. That's, I suppose, the added value from it. So that's the approach that we're taking with the root cause analysis. The way that we're dealing with it in the sort of back office and the system is by having categorisation, so that we can pull this information together. It's a little bit like the risk management I was talking about earlier. We can draw patterns and then share that information throughout the organisation. So, for example, if a lot of the same things kept failing at the same time in different teams for the same reason, in aggregate, we could take that intelligence, it'd be a lot more powerful, we could feed back that learning, and that would decrease the chances of that problem happening again. So that's how we're applying it in the back office, the categorisation, and we can use clever techniques to do that analysis.
Thank you, Jonathan. That is very cool. Thank you.
Well, that saved me asking that, because I didn't really know what it was. So that was my only question. Jenny.
Okay, so under 4.2, members of the committee are encouraged to propose areas where they would welcome assurance for potential inclusion in the audit plan. And I just put down anything on LGR, ICT. So that's the first thing, although ICT has come to the past scrutiny committee. And then the second one is actually about, where have I put it? It's, yes, the apprenticeships. Now, to me, I wonder if there's a crossover between this work, internal audit, and business analysis. And really, it's how quickly you think you'll be able to start getting someone in post. I know you've got April there, but at the start of this.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so thank you. I've noted the two bits of feedback around LGR and ICT for future audit work. I mean, to talk around that, ICT continues to be a very big, important risk, which needs to be managed on just a non-stop basis. With the LGR, it's a very interesting area because we can tackle that from a few different lenses. There's sort of like preparedness, how ready the organisation is. But I think perhaps more interestingly is getting the basics right. I think when any organisation goes through a period of intense, rapid change, there's a hazard, a danger that some of the key controls might suffer as a result because resources are stretched. So I think we will have a role actually looking at some of the basics, continue to operate in place, will be a vital part of that assurance cog to give that comfort and feedback to our stakeholders, which is this committee and the leadership team. So our sort of audit plan will be featuring in almost two different directions to deal with that. We've been chatting a lot to colleagues who've been through this experience already, to learn from what they did and what worked well and what didn't work so well in terms of the audit team. So we're definitely taking that learning on board and applying it to our team ourselves. So we're going to be as prepared as we can be, but certainly it's going to be a period of change. So we're going to be constantly having a watching brief and have open eyes around that. In terms of the apprenticeships and business analysts, I think this also touches upon an interesting area, which we have started to do in the past, which is where we can basically leverage skills from people who are not auditors and bring them into the team potentially to supplement the audit work. So if people have skills in things like data analytics and business analysis, we can work with them to effectively get more bang for our buck sort of thing. And also sometimes that helps to promote the profession as well by making people aware of what internal audit does. So we would be definitely exploring, interesting ways of working with other colleagues, especially in the lead up to LGR, in addition to the apprenticeships. We've done it with a few graduate trainee schemes already, and that's proved to be very, very helpful. I think it gives people a wonderful grounding to all the different work that goes on the council, because internal audit can look at everything. We're not just one team, we look at the whole sort of council, and it gives a great understanding of what it's all about. So we'll be doing more of that. With the apprenticeships and the timing comments, absolutely. We'll have to go through a process of sort of interviewing people and finding the right sort of candidates to bring them in. So hopefully they're people with interest out there, and hopefully they're a good fit for bringing into the council. But certainly, speaking to the training providers and also the professional body, the IIA, they're keen and ready to go. They've been waiting for about 12 months as well, so hopefully that'll be a good opportunity to reach out to people and promote the profession.
Are we all done? Excellent. So I think the recommendation on agenda item 7 was the committee is requested to note the report, and I guess we have fully done that. Okay, in that case then, there's no vote required for that. Last but not least, we have agenda item 8 on page 81, and there's a gentleman on here, report by Jonathan Tully, whoever that is. Oh, there he is again. It's over to you then.
Okay, no, I'm more than happy to take this.
So you're the star of the show this evening.
If you don't mind listening to me. Thank you. First of all, it's sort of a joint work with my colleague up here behind me, Dan. But I'm more than happy to talk through it. So the latest iteration of this committee, Civic Affairs and Audit Committee, has been operational since May 2025, as we all know. Now, as part of that review, we adopted best practice guidance from organisations like CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, and also ADSO, the Association of Democratic Service Officers. Now, best practice is for this committee to produce an annual report to full council. It's an opportunity to really promote good governance and let people know what this committee does, all the good positive work. So that's what we're looking to introduce. It's a report often known as a report to those charged with governance, but basically means full council. It was incorporated into our terms of reference following that review, as we adopted the best practice that was out there at the time. So this is the first time that we've produced such a report at this council. Fortunately, both Dan and myself have got experience of doing this at other councils. We've been able to bring that experience here. And we've used that to bring together sort of a draft report for your consideration if you want to use it. The aim would be to get a report together for the sort of main May council meeting, if possible. So we do have a bit of time, but we wanted to get a sort of draft format here for sort of consideration. Diving into the report, we're on page 85 of the packs. It's basically a summary of the work that's been done by the committee over the past 12 months in the municipal year. But what we do is we summarise all that positive work, which is very difficult to do, but try and break it down into bite-sized chunk and signpost to those activities. And we frame it in such a way that it helps demonstrate we follow the best practice, which is set out through CIPFA. So you'll see a lot of that terminology come through, but we do want to try and keep it in a fairly sort of plain English, easy to read format. So we start off, there's a forward from the chair. That is good practice to introduce the reports. We then go on to page 86, 87. We have an opportunity to really bring in the key issues that the committee's had to deal with. So the main one being the statement of accounts, getting those up to date, putting those in a good place, but also talking about some of the civic work, governance and risk, and we have a conclusion about our activities. Then, ever so important, I think, is on page 89, we have a committee overview, sort of setting out the role of all the committee members. It's very good to promote who we are and what we do to perhaps other members of the council which have not been involved in civic affairs and audit committee in the past. Then moving on to page 92, this is where we set out the more detailed summary of what we've done throughout the year. It's grouped by categories which are in the sit for guidance on audit committees, and that's good because it forms sort of a gap analysis, because we want to be able to demonstrate that we've been able to find things which fit into each category. So that's a useful way of framing it. Going on to page 97, looking forwards there, it's good to try and set out what we want to do over the next sort of 12 months. Certainly picking up on LGR is something that we would want to have on our radar. Also, moving on from that, good practice on the principles of public life, the Nolan principles, which apply to all people that work in public office. Always very good to promote that, and this is an opportunity for members of this council to be good ambassadors for that and promote that to other members. So those are the main sections of the report. Ultimately, it is your report. It's a report of members of the committee. Its main aim is to summarise what we've done and promote that and communicate that to the full council. And the report's sort of like prepared on what's worked well from our experience in the past. But it's your report, so happy to take comments and questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Dan, do you want to come in there and have some words yourself? I wasn't ignoring you, I promise.
No, that's all right, I don't mind. I think for me there's two sort of additional points. I think expanding what Jonathan sort of mentioned to committee is, I think it's an opportunity to have this annual report, and it might dovetail with scrutiny who might produce annual reports themselves, so you'll be able to see sort of the work that scrutiny are doing, audited and civic affairs are doing, and see some of that crossover and link and sort of a closer working relationship with scrutiny over the next coming years. I think that's quite an important one, because there'll be work that they're doing that actually might fit well into the terms of reference of this committee and vice versa. So I think that's probably quite a good starting point, that the scrutiny and the civic affairs and audit committee have annual reports. I think the other one, which is slightly different to a lot of other councils, then I think it's important to highlight, is that this committee has civic and constitutional roles as well. So I think we've put a little section in the report to make sure that we're covering off that this committee does uphold the civic traditions, and actually the sort of constitution as it sort of fits that more than audit committees do at other places across the country. So there's just a few extra bits for members to take on board.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions or observations of the officers? I thought you might.
I just wanted to say I'm going to sound like a broken record. Thank you for another good report. I think Civic Affairs is the least understood committee on the council. I know. We have some fun, don't we? I tried to explain what we did to our group, and I said, well, it's basically an audit committee with knobs on it. And they looked at me blankly and said, Naomi, what's an audit committee? So I'm really grateful to have this, so I can at last explain what we do on Monday evenings. Thank you.
Any other comments, members? Patrick?
Excellent introduction.
Jenny?
Right, I'm going to be operational, I think. Page 90, partnership under risk. I mean, it says you were reviewing and considering areas. I think it comes actually into the earlier papers, partnerships and collaborations, and actually giving a few examples. I don't think it's for this report. I think it's for the previous one, actually. But I just highlighted that, so that's what I was thinking about, obviously. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, it's I'm really pleased to see this, and I know some time ago we spoke about this, Jonathan, didn't we? And that's probably going back a year, maybe a bit more. And we thought this was a really good, it was Jonathan's idea, I believe, and it was a really good focus for us because, right enough, although we just had a bit of a giggle about it, Naomi's right. It's almost not quite a forgotten committee, but it looks so complex on paper that people think, oh, no, thank you, and they walk away. So the way you produce this is really great because it's not too long. It's not going to be arduous for anybody to read. And I'm pleased to see, as I would be, on page 91 that we've got some civic and constitutional stuff on here as well. And I'd like to perhaps make sure that's kept in there and expanded and people understand because especially new councillors when they come along, maybe not quite understand the magnificent history that we've got in the city for the city as a whole and the civic functions that it's performed here over 8 centuries. And it would be so sad, especially with the changes that we're facing, for that to be lost. And I was particularly keen to keep that in here. So I'm so pleased to see that the start of that documentation is in here. So, yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm very pleased to see it. Members, if we have no other comments. Yeah, Jamie, please.
Yeah, just to probably pick up on that point again, thank you for a very good report, and I think the delegation seems sensible. I think we've got most of what's needed. I guess picking up on that item around civic and constitutional functions, it's one part that is also important for this committee is actually keeping a check on democratic processes. I guess one of the things that will be coming up actually is we're going to be one of the I try not to use the word guinea pig, but we'll be testing the new voting process for early voting in the city. I guess it will be good for us to review actually how that's gone quickly when the year is back. And it probably doesn't need adding to this report, but it's just to highlight the importance of that, and particularly when there have been various changes in recent years. I think it's important that we as a committee kind of continue to try and push for as open and free elections as possible. When there has been changes that haven't really gone that way.
Actually, I think that's a really good point, which I hadn't thought about for a couple of weeks, but it came into my mind a couple of weeks ago and forgot to mention it. But you're right, it's a really good and important thing to do. It's not happening anywhere else, or maybe only a couple of places in the country, I'm not sure. But I know that that would be really interesting to see how that pans out, what difference it's made with the turnout and so forth, with that flexibility. So thanks for highlighting it. That was a really important point. Any others? In that case, all those in favour of the recommendations, please show in the normal fashion. Thank you so much. That concludes the meeting today, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for what was a really good debate there. But I do want to globally thank all the officers for what goes into these reports, all these civic affairs reports. They're an amazing amount of work. And the audit reports, I think sometimes they run its best part 300 pages. They're absolutely magnificent reports, and we do thank the officers for everything they do. And that's not just words. Everybody here really means that. So please thank those officers that have left. Thank you very much.